The photo that changed everything. The morning light was soft like silk across my face. The sound of the curtains brushing against the window pulled me from sleep. I remember the smell of coffee coming from downstairs and the faint laugh of my little boy Ethan. He was playing with his toy cars across the wooden floor, his tiny voice echoing through the house like music. I smiled. That day everything felt safe, everything felt perfect. James had just returned from a business trip, his suitcase still open by the bed, and the way he looked at me made it seem like the world could never go wrong. He kissed my forehead, said "Good morning, sunshine," and went to pour himself some coffee. It was the 1990s. The world moved slower, and love felt like something you could touch. I had no reason to think that one picture could destroy that peace. We had this habit every Sunday. We took photos together. I loved filling albums with memories. Ethan's first steps, his first words, his birthday cake smeared on his face. I believed that pictures captured truth, but I was wrong. That morning, James told me he was going to pick up the developed photos from the studio. We didn't have phones that took pictures back then. We had film and patience, and the kind of waiting that made every picture feel precious. I remember he kissed Ethan's head and told me he'd be right back. Hours passed, the sun began to hide behind clouds, and something inside me started to feel heavy, like a shadow slowly sliding across the room. I brushed it off, made pancakes for Ethan, and waited. The clock ticked louder than usual. When James finally walked in holding the yellow envelope, I laughed, saying, "Finally, my memories have come home." He smiled, but something in his eyes was unreadable. He handed me the pictures and said, "You'll love these." I took them to the couch. Ethan crawled beside me. We flipped through the glossy squares, each one brighter than the last. Our family smiling by the lake, Ethan on James's shoulders, me holding flowers. Everything was perfect until I saw the last photo. It was from the same day, same place, same frame, but Ethan wasn't there. It was just me and James standing by the lake, his arm around me, and empty grass where Ethan had been in every picture. Before I blinked, thinking maybe the film was damaged, maybe the light had changed, maybe the developer made a mistake, but deep down something whispered no. I showed it to James, asked, "Where is Ethan in this one?" He frowned, said, "What do you mean he's right there?" He leaned closer, looked confused. I told him, "No, James, he isn't. Look, he's gone." He stared at the photo again, and his smile faded. He said, "Maybe it's just a bad print. I'll check again tomorrow." But his voice was strange, like he didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to believe him, but the way his hand trembled told me more than his words ever could. That night I couldn't sleep. The photo lay on the nightstand next to our bed, and every time I turned the lamp off, I could still see it in the dark, that empty space beside us, haunting me like a ghost. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the silence in the house grew louder. Around midnight, I heard Ethan's toy car rolling on the floor. I thought he'd woken up, so I went to his room, but when I opened the door, he was fast asleep, his hand clutching his blanket, the toy still at the center of the room, slowly spinning, even though no one had touched it. Something inside me froze. I turned the light off and backed away, my breath short, my heart unsure of what was real anymore. The next morning, James acted normal, made breakfast, turned on the radio like nothing had happened. But when I asked about the photo, he brushed it away, said, "Maybe you're overthinking things, Eleanor. We can take new pictures." But I wasn't imagining it, because that evening when I checked the photo album, the same picture had appeared there too. I was sure I hadn't put it in there, yet it was already glued perfectly between the pages. My hand shook as I flipped through the rest of the album and noticed another strange thing. In older pictures, Ethan's face looked slightly blurred, like he was fading from every image. I tried to call the photo studio, but the number didn't connect. It just rang into a hollow silence, then stopped. Days turned to weeks, and Ethan began having strange dreams. He would wake up crying, saying, "Mummy, why did you leave me by the lake?" I never told him about the missing photo. I never mentioned it, yet his words cut through me like a secret I didn't know I kept. James grew distant. He stopped joining us for dinner. Sometimes I would catch him standing by the hallway, staring at that same picture as if waiting for something to move inside it. One evening, I went to the attic to look for old albums, maybe to compare, maybe to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The dust felt heavy in the air, and the floor creaked under every step. I found an old box marked Summer 1990 inside, with dozens of undeveloped film rolls and a single photograph curled at the edges. It showed the same lake, the same two figures standing there, but this time it wasn't me. It was a woman who looked almost like me, but her eyes were hollow, and the child beside her wasn't Ethan. I dropped the picture. The air felt colder. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, careful, familiar. I turned and saw James, his eyes dark like a storm. He said softly, "You shouldn't have come up here, Eleanor." I asked, "What is this? What is going on? Who is that woman?" But he didn't answer. He just looked down at the picture and whispered, "Some things are better left unseen." That night I couldn't stay in the same room with him. The air between us was full of things we didn't say. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was warning. When I tucked Ethan into bed, he looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Mummy, if I go missing, will you still find me?" I froze, asked, "Why would you say that?" He whispered, "Because I saw Daddy hiding the photo under his pillow." My world began to tilt, the line between truth and illusion bending until it almost broke. I waited until James fell asleep and searched under his pillow. The picture was there, but now Ethan wasn't just missing from it. Even my reflection looked strange, like I was fading too. I held that picture close to my chest as if pressing it would bring my child back, as if love could rewrite what was lost. The lamp flickered once, then twice, and for a second I saw a small handprint appear on the glass of the window. The same handprint that had once belonged to Ethan. And that was the moment I realized something terrible had begun. The lake that never let go. The night after I found that handprint, something inside me broke. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing Ethan's face disappearing piece by piece, like a memory being erased. I sat by his bed till sunrise, watching his tiny chest rise and fall, whispering prayers I wasn't even sure I remembered. When the morning light came through the curtains, I went straight to the lake, the same one from the photos, the same one where everything had changed. The air there felt heavy, colder than it should have been. The trees whispered like they remembered things I didn't. I stood by the water's edge, clutching that strange photo. My reflection stared back at me, and for a moment I thought I saw Ethan standing beside me, but when I turned there was no one. I shouted his name, Ethan, Ethan. The sound echoed across the still water, but nothing answered except the ripples that moved without wind. A man walking his dog nearby stopped and looked at me with pity. Maybe he thought I was mad, maybe I was. I asked him if he had ever seen a little boy here around this lake. He shook his head, said this place has been quiet since the accident. Accident? What accident? I asked. He frowned, said it was years ago, before you moved here. A woman and her child drowned here. No one really talks about it anymore. My throat went dry. I asked their names, but he just shrugged, said nobody remembers names, just stories. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. When I got home, James was waiting at the door, his face pale, his hands shaking. Where were you? He asked. I told him I went to the lake. He flinched like the word itself hurt him. He said, never go there again, Eleanor. Do you understand? Never. I asked why. What are you hiding? James, his eyes darted away. He said, I'm protecting you, that's all I'm doing. But his voice cracked, and I knew protection wasn't the truth, it was fear. That night I searched the house, every drawer, every shelf, looking for more photos, something, anything that could explain what was happening. Behind the bookshelf in our bedroom, I found a small wooden box. Inside were old negatives, a child's drawing, and a woman's locket. The drawing made my heart stop. It was of three figures, a man, a woman, and a child by a lake. The man's face was clearly James, the woman's face was scratched out, and the child looked just like Ethan. The locket held a faded picture of James holding a baby, not Ethan, another baby with lighter hair and different eyes. The back of the photo had a name written in ink, Lily. Who was Lily? When James came upstairs, I hid the box. He looked at me quietly and said, you've been to the attic, haven't you? I didn't answer. He said, please don't do this, Eleanor, let the past stay buried. I said, whose past, James, ours or yours? He turned away and said, just remember, I love you both no matter what happens. That night it rained hard, thunder rolling across the sky. I sat by the window with Ethan sleeping in my lap, watching the lightning flicker over the lake in the distance. And for a second, in that flash of light, I saw something moving near the water, a shadow small like a child standing still in the storm. I pressed my face to the glass, trying to see clearer, but the next flash showed nothing but darkness. When I finally slept, I dreamed of the lake again, but this time I was standing in the water waist deep, holding Ethan's hand. He kept saying, Mommy, don't let go, please don't let go, and when I looked down, his hand wasn't warm anymore, it was cold like glass. I woke screaming. James wasn't beside me. His side of the bed was empty. The window was open, curtains flapping in the wind. I rushed to Ethan's room. He was safe, still asleep, his toy car beside him, but there were wet footprints leading from the hallway to his bed and back out again. I followed them barefoot, the floor freezing under me. The prints stopped at the back door, the lock undone, rain blowing in from outside. I stepped out calling for James, but instead I saw the same yellow envelope, the one that had held the photos, lying soaked on the porch. Inside was another picture. It was the same lake again, but now there were three figures standing far away, one man, one woman, and a child. The man looked like James, the woman like me, but the child was turned away, and in his reflection in the water there was no face. I dropped the photo and whispered, Ethan. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. I went to the town library, looked through old records, newspaper archives, anything about drownings at the lake. My hands trembled as I turned the yellowed pages, and then I saw it. An article dated 1989. Local mother and child presumed dead after tragic drowning. Husband survived. The photo attached was small, grainy, but clear enough. The man was James Harper. The woman looked like me. The child's name written below, Lily Harper, age 4. I stayed at it until the letters blurred. I ran outside, my chest pounding, my hands shaking. Who was I then? Who was Ethan? What was this family I had built? When I returned home, James was sitting on the couch holding that same wooden box, his eyes red from crying. He said, you weren't supposed to find that, Eleanor. You were never supposed to remember. Remember what I asked? He whispered, Lily wasn't just our daughter, she was yours. My knees gave out. I said, that's impossible. I only have Ethan. He said you had Lily first, before the accident, before everything changed. I felt dizzy, the walls spinning, the photos on the shelf trembling as if alive. He continued, saying, after the accident you lost your memory. The doctors said it was better that way. We moved you here, started over. Ethan was born years later. I didn't tell you because I couldn't lose you again. I screamed, asking, where is she now? Where is Lily? He whispered, she's still at the lake, Eleanor. She never left. The thunder outside cracked like the sky was tearing apart, and somewhere deep inside my heart I knew he was telling the truth, but also hiding something more, something worse. Because if Lily was still there, then whose laughter had I been hearing in Ethan's room every night? The hidden daughter. The night after James said those words, I could not breathe. I sat on the floor beside the wooden box, feeling the cold wood against my skin, my hands shaking as if they no longer belonged to me. Lily. He said her name, and it felt like a ghost had entered the room. I tried to remember, but all that came were flashes, water, laughter, sunlight on the lake, and then darkness. Ethan slept in his room peacefully, his small chest rising and falling. I looked at him and wondered how I could have forgotten another child, my own blood. How could a mother forget her daughter unless the memory was stolen from her, unless someone had taken it away? The rain kept falling, and the sound of it on the window felt like whispers. I closed my eyes and heard a voice, soft and distant, saying, Mommy. It was not Ethan. I knew his voice. It was smaller, sadder, like it came from a place where time had stopped. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and for a moment I thought I saw her behind me, a little girl with wet hair and a white dress, staring, not angry, just waiting. When I turned, she was gone, but the smell of lake water stayed in the room. In the morning, James acted like nothing had happened. He made tea, he smiled and said we should go somewhere together, maybe a small trip to clear our minds. I asked him if he meant the lake. He said no, anywhere, but there his voice cracked again. I wanted to scream. I wanted answers. So when he left for work, I went to the old photo studio, the one that had given us those pictures. The door was locked, dust covered the windows. I knocked until my hand hurt. Then an old woman opened it. She looked at me for a long time like she recognized me. She said, you came back after so many years. I asked, do you remember me? She nodded slowly and said, you were here with your husband and your daughter. You wanted the lost photo destroyed. I said, what photo? She went inside and came back with a small envelope. She said, I kept it because something felt wrong about it. She handed it to me and said, I saw the lake in that picture. I saw the girl disappear before my eyes. It was the only time I ever saw a photo change itself. My heart raced. I opened the envelope. There was the lake again, and in it 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a child, but the child's face was blurred, and beneath it, written in faint pencil, were the words, she never left. I asked the woman who wrote this. She said, I don't know, but when you came here last time you were crying. You said something was coming for you, and then you vanished. I ran out of the studio clutching the photo, the world around me spinning. When I reached home, James was standing by the door again, his face pale. He asked, where did you go? I said, I went to the studio. His eyes darkened. He said, I told you never to go back there. I said, then tell me the truth, James. Who was Lily really? He turned away, said, she was your first child. You drowned trying to save her. You were pulled from the water. I couldn't reach her. The doctors said you might never remember, so I never told you the rest. I asked what rest. He said she still comes back sometimes. I see her too. I hear her name. When I close my eyes, she wants you to remember because she never forgave me. I said, forgive you for what, James? He didn't answer. He just sat on the couch, his head in his hands, whispering over and over, I am sorry, I am sorry. That night I stayed awake. Ethan was sleeping, but I heard humming coming from the hallway, a soft melody, familiar and wrong. I followed it barefoot, the air cold, the house dark. I saw the shadow of a small figure near the window. I whispered, Lily. The humming stopped. She turned slowly, her face hidden by hair, and then in the faint light I saw her eyes. They were mine. She said, Mummy, why did you let him go? And when she said that, the lamp beside me shattered into pieces. I ran back to Ethan's room, but the bed was empty, the blanket warm, his toy car rolling slowly across the floor. I screamed his name. The house echoed, but there was no answer. I ran outside into the rain, calling Ethan. Ethan. The lake in the distance seemed to glow under the lightning. I ran barefoot through mud, through water, through fear, until I reached it. The lake was calm, too calm, the reflection of the sky trembling. I shouted Ethan over and over, my voice breaking. I stepped into the water, my dress heavy against my legs. Something cold brushed my ankle, and I looked down. There was a small hand under the surface. I reached down, grabbed it, pulled, but it slipped away like smoke. The water rippled, and I saw her face again, Lily, standing there just below the surface, her lips moving, but no sound coming out. I screamed, tell me where he is, please tell me. She looked at me, her eyes full of sadness, and she whispered without sound, he took him. Then the water went still again, and the reflection showed only me. I stumbled back to the shore, crying, shaking, calling James' name again, and again he appeared from the fog, his clothes wet, his face white like chalk. He said, I told you not to come here. I asked, where is Ethan? He didn't answer. He just looked down at the water. And in that moment I knew the truth. Whatever was buried at this lake was not finished with us. The confession. The rain stopped all at once like the sky itself was holding its breath. I stood there trembling, mud on my feet, the lake quiet as glass, James staring into it like he was waiting for someone to rise from beneath the surface. I whispered again, "Where is Ethan?" He said nothing, his lips pale, his eyes distant, like he was somewhere else far away. I stepped closer, grabbed his arm, and said, "Tell me now, where is our son?" He looked at me, finally tears in his eyes, and said, "She took him, Eleanor. She said I have to give him back or she will never rest." I felt my heart tear in two. I said, "Who, Lily?" He nodded slowly, said, "I tried to stop her, but she comes every time the lake calls her. She wants what she lost." I said, "You mean she wants me to lose Ethan too?" He shook his head, said, "She wants you to remember everything." The world tilted around me, memories flickered like broken film, the day of the accident, the smell of summer air, the laughter, the scream, the water closing over me. I saw it all like watching another life, and in it James was standing on the shore holding a camera calling my name, and I was in the water holding a little girl who slipped from my hands. I fell to my knees, the water soaking through my dress, my body shaking from inside out. James whispered, "I tried to save her, Eleanor, I swear I did, but you went under, and when they pulled you out you didn't remember me, you didn't remember her, and I couldn't tell you because I thought if you forgot maybe you could live again." I said, "You lied to me all these years." He said, "I did it for you." I screamed, "You did it for yourself because you couldn't face what you did." He looked at me, his voice breaking. He said, "I was supposed to watch her that day. You went to get the blanket. She wanted to see the ducks. I turned away for a second, just a second, and she fell. I froze. I couldn't move. By the time I reached her, she was gone. I thought saving you would make it right, but it never did." I stared at the lake, the water so calm it almost looked peaceful, but I could feel her there waiting, listening. Then James said, "I keep seeing her at night standing by the window watching Ethan sleep. She looks just like she did the day she drowned." I whispered, "She wants me to remember." He nodded, "She wants us both to." When we got home, the house felt wrong. The lights flickered, the air cold. Ethan's toy car rolled slowly across the floor by itself. It stopped at my feet, and I heard a voice behind me, soft like wind, saying, "Mommy." I turned. There she was standing in the hallway, her dress dripping water, her hair clinging to her face. She looked at me and said, "You forgot me." I reached out, shaking, whispering, "Lily, baby, I never meant to." She said, "You promised you would never let go." I said, "I tried, I swear I tried." She said, "Then why did you let him hide me?" I looked back at James. He was crying, saying, "Lily, I'm sorry, please forgive me." She turned to him, eyes dark, said, "You left me." He took a step back, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." She said, "You took my picture away, you buried me in the dark, and you made her forget." I felt my breath catch. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at him, her small hand lifting, slowly pointing toward the lake. Even though we were miles from it, I heard the sound of water moving. James shouted, "Stop, please." She whispered, "You took everything from me," and then she was gone. The lights went out, the house silent except for the sound of dripping water. I held Ethan close, whispering, you are safe, but I could still smell the lake, still hear her song. The next morning, James packed his bag, said he needed to go back to the lake, said he had to make it right. I told him not to go. He said it's the only way to end this, and if I don't, she will keep coming. I watched him drive away, his face pale, his hands shaking. I wanted to stop him, but deep down I knew this was something he had to face alone. As the sun began to set, I felt the house grow colder again. Ethan was drawing in his notebook. When he said, "Mummy, why is Daddy standing in the water?" I ran to the window and saw him at the edge of the lake, his reflection broken by ripples, his arms open wide like he was waiting for someone. I screamed his name, but my voice didn't reach him. The air thick, the world spinning, the water began to rise around him, slowly pulling him deeper until he vanished beneath the surface. I ran to the lake again, shouting, crying, calling, but only the echo of my own voice answered, and then I saw her standing in the middle of the water, holding his hand, her face calm, her eyes bright, and then they both disappeared. The water went still again, silent, nothing left but the wind and my reflection. I fell to my knees, whispering his name again and again until the night swallowed my voice. When I turned to go back home, Ethan was standing at the shore holding the locket I had found in the box. He said, "She gave it back, Mummy." She said, "You remember now." I took the locket in my hand, opened it, and saw two faces, mine and hers, Lily smiling, her eyes full of peace, and behind it a small note folded carefully. It said it was never about revenge, it was about remembering. I held Ethan close, the moonlight shining over the water, and for the first time in years the lake looked still, truly still. But deep inside I knew the story was not over. Because sometimes the past doesn't rest, it waits. The return. The night after the lake took James, I sat by the window holding Ethan close. The moonlight was cold and the silence heavier than air. The house felt empty, like every wall remembered his voice. I told myself he was gone, but my heart refused to believe it, because love does not stop breathing just because the body does. Ethan asked me, "Mummy, is Daddy with her now?" I nodded, because the truth was something he could not carry. I said, "Yes, my love, they are together now," and he whispered, "Then maybe she is not angry anymore." I stayed awake until dawn. The house smelled of rain, the locket still in my hand. I opened it again, looked at Lily's face, her small eyes kind, her smile gentle. She did not look like something that haunted, she looked like something that once loved. As the sun rose, a knock echoed through the house, slow, soft, steady. I went to the door and found no one, but on the ground lay another envelope, yellow, aged, and damp. I picked it up with shaking hands, opened it, and inside was a photograph. It showed the lake, but not the way I remembered it. The water was dark, the sky empty. There were no figures, no faces, just ripples spreading from the center like something had moved beneath the surface. On the back, written faintly in my own handwriting, were the words, "She is not done yet." My heart raced. I looked at Ethan. He was standing behind me, his eyes wide. He said, "Mommy," she was singing again. I asked who. He said, "The girl in the mirror." She said, "The lake is calling." I ran to the mirror in the hallway, the one that hung since we moved in. The glass fogged over, and when I wiped it clean, I saw not my reflection, but the lake behind me, moving, slow wave shadows forming a shape that looked like a hand reaching out. I stumbled back, my breath shaking. I whispered, "Lily," but no sound came, only the faint echo of my name. The air grew colder. Pictures on the walls began to tilt slightly, like unseen fingers were brushing against them. Ethan hid behind me, whispering, "Mommy, make it stop." I said, "I will, my love, I promise I will." I went to the attic, the place where it had all started. The box was still there, the dust heavy. I opened it, and inside were things that had not been there before: a small shoe soaked and dark, a piece of ribbon, a letter folded in half. I unfolded it slowly, the paper fragile, the ink blurred, but the words still readable. It said, "Mommy, I forgive you, but he cannot come where I am until the truth is told. Tell them what really happened. Tell them what he did." My hands trembled. I sank to the floor, the world spinning. I heard her voice again, soft behind me, saying, "You have to tell them or he will never rest." I whispered, "What did he do?" And the air grew heavy. Her shadow moved across the floor toward the window. She said, "Look at the photo one last time." I pulled the photo from my pocket, the one from the envelope, held it to the light, and as I looked closer, I saw shapes hidden beneath the surface, faint outlines, not of one figure, but two small ones, a child and a man, and in the man's reflection, his hand was on the child's shoulder, pushing down. I dropped the photo. The room spun. I said, "No, it cannot be." She said, "You have to see it. You have to remember. He did not try to save me, Mommy. He let me fall." Tears filled my eyes. I whispered, "Lily, no." She said, "He lied to you all these years. He told you he froze. He told you he tried. But he didn't. He pushed me. He wanted me gone." I felt my knees give way. I could barely breathe. I said, "Why would he do that?" She said, "Because he thought you loved me more than him." The wind outside howled, the windows rattled, the house itself seemed to cry. I closed my eyes, pressed the locket against my heart, whispering, "I am sorry, my baby, I am so sorry." The light flickered, and for a moment the air grew calm. Her voice softened, saying, "Now you remember, now you can rest too." I said, "What about Ethan?" She said, "He is safe now. You have broken the circle." I opened my eyes, and the attic was quiet again, dust floating in golden morning light, the box empty, the photo gone, only the locket remained warm in my hand. Ethan called from downstairs, "Mommy, breakfast is ready." His voice bright and sweet like sunlight. I walked down slowly, my feet light like the weight of the world had lifted. He smiled at me, his eyes peaceful, his laughter real. For the first time since the lake, everything felt normal again. The air smelled like coffee, the light gentle on the floor. But when I looked at the family photo on the wall, something was different. The picture that once showed only me and James now had another figure standing beside us, a little girl with her hand on my shoulder, smiling. And in that moment I knew Lily was finally home. The whisper in the walls. Days passed since the morning Lily's face appeared in the photo, and peace seemed to return like a stranger pretending to belong. Ethan laughed again. He played in the garden chasing butterflies and calling my name. The air smelled of fresh bread and sun, but every night when the house grew still I heard it, a faint hum like someone breathing through the walls. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was the wind or the old pipes, but deep inside I knew this house still remembered more than it should. One evening, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, "Mommy, do you think Lily visits us?" I smiled and said, "Maybe she just wants to make sure we are okay." He smiled and closed his eyes, whispering, "She talks to me sometimes. She says the water is gone now, but the walls still whisper." My heart tightened. I kissed his forehead and went downstairs. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I sat on the couch, the photo still hanging on the wall, the little girl's smile soft and kind. But then a faint voice from behind the wall said my name, Eleanor. I froze. The sound came again. "Eleanor, help me." I pressed my hand to the wall. It felt warm, like something alive was moving beneath the paint. I whispered, "Who are you?" And the voice replied, "I am not Lily. I am the one before her." My heart pounded. I whispered, "What do you mean?" And the voice said, "He lied to you about more than one child." The floor creaked behind me. Ethan stood there holding the locket, his eyes sleepy. He said, "Mommy, I saw her, the other girl. She was standing by the mirror. She said she used to live here before us." I grabbed his hand, pulled him close, whispering, "Go back to bed." He shook his head. "She said if you tell me to sleep, she will wake the house again." A sound rose from the basement, soft at first, then growing louder like the hum of 1,000 whispers at once. I walked down the stairs, the air cold, each step echoing like footsteps that did not belong to me. The door to the old cellar stood half open. I pushed it slowly, and inside the smell of damp wood and earth filled the air. On the wall, faint outlines of drawings, children's drawings, stick figures, a house, a lake, a man, a woman, and beneath it a single name written in faint chalk, Eleanor. I whispered the name, and the room seemed to breathe. I turned and saw a shadow move across the far wall, small and trembling. Then a whisper came right beside my ear. She was the first one. The light bulb flickered. A rush of cold air swept across my face. I stepped back, my foot hitting something soft. I looked down and saw a small cloth doll, its face half gone, one button missing. I picked it up and felt a wave of sadness so deep it felt like drowning. The voice whispered again, he built this house for her, but when she disappeared he buried her name too. I dropped the doll, my hand shaking. I said, no, this cannot be true. The house groaned, a low sound like grief moving through its bones. When I looked at the drawings again, the figures seemed different. The man's face darker, his hand reaching for the smaller figure, the child running toward the lake, drawn in blue chalk that had begun to smear as if it had once been wet. I turned to run, but the stairs behind me were gone, the space where the door had been now only a wall. I screamed for Ethan, my voice echoing through the cellar. Then faintly from above I heard him calling, Mommy. I can hear her singing again. The air shimmered, the voice of a child filled the cellar, singing a song I had never taught my son. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The wall began to crack, lines spreading upward as dust fell from the ceiling. I backed away, clutching the locket to my chest, saying, please stop, please just let him be. And the whisper said, not until he knows the truth. The wall split open, revealing behind it a small hollow space. Inside it lay a box smaller than the first, tied with a red ribbon. I reached for it, opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph, aged and torn. It showed a man standing by the lake holding two children, one in each arm, one face. I knew Lily, the other. I did not. Her name written faintly at the bottom, Eleanor. I fell to my knees, tears burning my eyes. I whispered, he never told me he had another daughter. The house grew silent again, the air still, the whisper fading slowly like a sigh after a long cry. I walked back upstairs into the quiet light. Ethan waiting at the top of the stairs, his face pale. He asked Mommy who was Eleanor. I hugged him tight, saying, someone who wants to be remembered. He looked past me toward the hallway mirror and said, she is right there, Mommy, she is smiling. The confession by the lake. The morning came gray and cold, the air heavy with silence, the kind that makes even birds forget their songs. Ethan sat by the window watching the fog roll over the fields. The house felt strange, quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. I knew the time had come to face what I had been running from, the truth buried under water and memory. I told Ethan we were going for a walk. He nodded without a word, holding the small locket between his fingers as if it were keeping him safe. The path to the lake was damp from the rain, the trees bending low, their branches brushing against us like they too wanted to whisper something they had seen long ago. When we reached the edge of the water, I saw him standing there, James Harper, his back turned, the wind pulling at his coat. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, weaker. When he turned, his eyes found mine, and for a moment I saw everything we had lost, love, guilt, fear, and something darker. Eleanor, he said, you should not have opened that box. His voice cracked like dry wood. I said, you lied to me about her, about Eleanor. He looked at Ethan, who stood quietly beside me, the fog curling around him like a ghost hand. James whispered, it was supposed to be forgotten. She was sick, Eleanor. She was not like other children. She would talk to people who were not there. She would draw things she could not have seen. She said the house spoke to her. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. You buried her name, and you let me live in that house without knowing. He stepped closer, the mud sucking at his shoes. I tried to protect you. I tried to protect him, he said, nodding toward Ethan. She said he would come. She said a boy would be born who would see her again. I thought if I burned everything, it would stop. The wind rose, carrying his words across the water. I felt the air tighten like the world itself was listening. The lake rippled, though no stone had been thrown. You cannot erase the past, James. I said, it always finds a way back. He looked down at his reflection and whispered, she calls me still at night. I hear her from the walls. I see her in my dreams standing by the water. She says, Daddy, why did you leave me? Ethan tugged my hand, his voice soft. Mummy, she is here. I can see her. The air shimmered, the fog thickened, and there she was, a small figure in a white dress standing on the water, her hair floating like dark ribbons, her eyes deep and endless. She looked not angry, but sad. She spoke without sound, her lips forming the words, you forgot me, Daddy. James fell to his knees, his voice breaking. I am sorry, Eleanor. I am so sorry. He reached out, but his hand touched only air. The girl smiled faintly, the water around her glowing pale blue. She turned to me and whispered, he kept me here so you would never know, but now you do take care of him, take care of my brother. And with that she faded into the mist, the lake calm once more as if she had never been there. James stayed kneeling, staring at the water, whispering her name over and over until the light began to fade. Ethan and I stood silently, the sky turning a deep red above us. When he finally looked up, his eyes were hollow. He said, "She is free now, but I am not," and before I could stop him, he stepped forward into the lake, the water swallowing him in seconds. No scream, no struggle, only the sound of ripples fading into silence. I ran to the edge, calling his name, but the lake gave nothing back. Ethan stood behind me, holding the locket, tears running down his face. He said, "Mummy," she said, "he is home now." I fell to my knees, the cold water soaking my dress. I whispered to the wind, "Elara, James, may you both find peace." That night the house was quiet, no whispers, no shadows, just the sound of rain against the windows. Ethan slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. I sat by his bed watching his chest rise and fall, and when I finally looked toward the mirror, I saw her standing there smiling softly before fading into light. Everything was perfect once, now it was only real. And maybe the final letter. The sun rose pale and weak over the house the morning after the lake. It felt like the whole world had taken a breath and did not know how to let it go. The air smelled of damp wood and smoke. I walked through the halls barefoot, the floorboards cold under my feet, the quiet pressing against my chest. Ethan was still asleep, his hand clutching the locket like a promise. I went to the study, the door creaking as I opened it, dust hanging in the light like pieces of memory floating. I had not been in here since before I knew about Elara. The desk was covered in papers yellowed with time, and in the corner a small wooden box I had never seen before. It had a note on top in James's handwriting, "For Eleanor, when the house finally sleeps." My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a folded letter tied with a black ribbon and a single photo, the same one from before, but this time both children were there, Lily and Elara, their faces clear, their smiles soft and unbroken. I opened the letter, the paper fragile, the ink faded, but the words still alive. "Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means the house has spoken again, and the past has come for me. I did not want you to carry this burden. I thought silence could protect you, but silence only feeds the ghosts. Elara was our firstborn. She was the light of my life, but she saw too much. She would talk about people who were not there," she said. The house whispered to her about what was to come. I did not believe her, not until the night she disappeared. It was raining. I searched for hours. The lake was high, the water dark. I saw her doll by the edge. I called her name again and again, but she never answered. The next morning they found her body near the reeds, her eyes still open, her lips still moving as if she were trying to speak. I buried her name to bury my shame. When you came into my life, I told myself I could start again, that the past was gone, but this house never forgets. It remembers every voice, every tear, every lie. I built walls to hide her, and those walls began to whisper. When our son was born, I heard her laugh again. Through him, I saw her eyes in his smile. "Please forgive me, Eleanor. I kept you in the dark not to hurt you, but because I was afraid if you knew you would leave, and I could not bear to lose you too. Tell Ethan his sister loved him before he was ever born. Tell him she waited for him. Tell him the house only whispered because it missed the sound of his laughter. Love, James." I let the letter fall to my lap, tears running down my face. The room blurred, the sound of rain against the window soft and steady. I whispered to the empty air, "I forgive you, James, and I forgive her too." Then something strange happened. The photo on the desk began to fade, the edges glowing faintly, and for a moment I saw them both, James and Elara, standing together by the lake, hand in hand, smiling, before they vanished into light. The air grew warm. The smell of lilies filled the room, the same scent that had haunted me for months, but now it was gentle like a goodbye. I walked to Ethan's room. He stirred in his sleep and whispered, "Mummy, she says she is happy now. She says thank you." I smiled, brushed his hair back, and whispered, "Tell her she can rest now." That night the whispers finally stopped, the house silent, at last, not heavy, not haunted, just quiet like peace. Years later, when Ethan grew up and we moved away, he asked me if I ever missed that house. I said, "Sometimes, when the wind is just right." I think I still hear her laugh carried through the trees, not as a ghost, but as a memory reminding me that love, even broken, even buried, never really dies. It only changes shape. Everything was perfect once, until the photo without my child showed me the truth, and maybe perfection was never meant to last, maybe love was.